Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we're going to be talking about residential wells, what they look like, what the parts are, and how they work. So if you guys know, we just moved into a new house here and we have a residential well here that's had some issues, and so we've learned a lot about wells and we wanted to share that with you guys because we couldn't find a really good video on what the different parts were on a well. So where do you find wells first of all? First of all, you find them in typically more rural areas. You can also find them on farmland, that kind of stuff. But it's places where city water doesn't service the houses because usually they're far away from where the city center is. In our case, we are in a more rural area of the city and city water doesn't reach out here, so they have drilled a well. So first of all, we'll talk about the basic pieces that are in every single well that you're going to find, and then we're going to talk about some extra pieces that we have or you may find at other wells. So first of all, you're going to have the well itself, the actual hole that's drilled in the ground. You're also going to have a pump that's inside that hole, and it can range anywhere from 50 to 1,500 feet down into the ground. Ours happens to be at 1,100 feet, it's really deep, and there's a pump that's at the end of that line, and wires run up the top of the well to the top of the pad where they connect all of the timers and electronics and whatnot. So in addition to the submersible pump that's in the well pipe itself, you're going to have two additional things on the well pad. First of all is a booster pump. This booster pump is what pressurizes the water as it comes out of the well and goes into your house to make sure things like your bathtub and your faucets have pressure when you turn them on. The other thing that's an integral part of that setup is the high pressure tank. It's going to be just a small tank, probably in the realm of 30 to 50 gallons, somewhere around there, and it helps maintain that pressure constantly in your house. So that way the water pressure in your house isn't dumping and going up and then dumping again. It also helps prevent the boost pump from turning on every single time whenever you turn the water on in your house. Now most wells work great with that setup because there's enough water inside that well to provide for the house and everything you'd need without having to have extra storage or anything else like that. Unfortunately, some wells don't have enough water production to be able to sustain on-demand water in your house. So instead what people do is they install a water tank, which is what we've done at our house, and we just put a second one in actually. And so what happens in that situation is the water comes out of the well and into that water storage tank where it sits and waits. Now the boost pump has already pressurized that high pressure tank that's there on the pad and all the water that goes into the house. So if you just turn the faucet on for just a real quick second, it's going to take water out of that high pressure tank and out of the lines and into your faucet. It's not going to necessarily turn on the boost pump right away. But if you're running water for a consistent amount of time or a long period of time, that boost pump is going to turn on so it can keep that pressure and pull water from the water storage tank. So that's a simple explanation of a low producing well. The more complex answer isn't that bad. There's just a few bits and pieces that I think will be helpful to understand so you can help troubleshoot your own system if you have one. So in a low producing well, what happens is that submersible pump will start pumping water up that line and into the water storage tank. Now, when it runs out of water in that well pipe, what happens is there's a pressure switch in that submersible pump that triggers and it stops pumping. Now up on the well pad itself, there's going to be a little mechanical timer that times a certain amount of time. You can set it from like 2 minutes to like 4 hours. And after that timer stops or ends, it's going to start that submersible pump again and start pumping water back into the tank. And then that whole cycle repeats. Now, what's important to know about this is it needs some adjusting sometimes if you have more water or less water. So what can happen is that timer can be too short, for example. So when it really should be like an hour in between pumpings, it's say half an hour. And so the well itself hasn't had a chance to refill, and so it's not going to be pumping as much water. If that timer is too great, what happens is that well pump is going to be pumping all that water up out of the well, but it's going to refill faster and it's just going to be sitting there. So you could be losing out on water production if your timer is too great. The problem with a lot of these timers is they're really finicky. Like half a centimeter is the difference between a 2 minutes and a 50 minutes on mine. So you really got to play around with it. You got to go out there and be working on it, listen to it when it's pumping, for how long, and just to be able to really optimize your production rate in your. So let's go outside. I'll show you our well setup and we'll follow all the pipes and show you what everything does. Alrighty, well here is our well setup. So basically we got our one tank here that we use for all of our household stuff, and then we got our new tank that we'll show you how we installed next week, and then we have our well pad down here. So a couple of things I'll point out to you real quick. We got our well, which is kind of back in there. I'll show you that in a second. We got our high pressure tank, which is that big tank right over here, and then we have our boost pump down here, and this is what pressurizes all of the lines. There does have to be 240 volts electricity out here, so it does have electricity coming in from the main breaker box, and then we have all of our timers and all of that stuff over here. So this is the actual well that goes down into the ground, in our case 1,100 feet. You can tell the stainless steel pipe comes up to the top, and it'll actually tee and go behind it for where the water goes. But up here is basically the controller and the electrical input for all of the submersible well pump stuff. So kind of like I mentioned before, from the actual well, the water just goes through the pipe. It's down there and actually goes up to the top, and will input into the water storage tank on the very top. It kind of flow in and it drops down and fills up from the bottom up. That way it doesn't interfere with any of the water coming out of the tank. So with that being said, water out of the tank. You can ignore this other stuff, these manifolds and pipe that I just put in. That's just going to connect the other tank over here and the small tank that's behind this. So water coming out that's useful for the house comes out of this line here. You can tell it's all insulated because it does freeze a little bit over the winter time. And then from there, it goes to the boost pump right here, this blue pump. But from there, from the boost pump, it goes up and in, down and into the high pressure tank. Now something you'll notice is there's no output from the tank. And that's just because it's just part of the line setup. There's no in and out. It just basically is a holding tank for the water. You'll notice though that when it comes over here to go to the high pressure tank, there's this right here. This is a pressure switch. This is what's going to tell the boost pump to turn on or turn off depending on the rise or the fall of the pressure in the line. And that's very important to have and to check. So from there though, the water actually goes into the house through this line right here. There's a small filter kind of a thing that helps protect the water and stuff. And it goes down here, and then it actually goes down in the ground right over here to go into the house. This over here is something we just had put in for our fire sprinklers. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So that is basically it. Over here is all the electrical controllers and connections. And then this is, like I said, the electrical controls for the pump. It's not that exciting. Like I did say earlier, there is 240 over here to provide the well pump with power, as well as the boost pump and some extra spots just in case. Something you'll see here, and that is on some wells as well, is these extra electrical outlets. This is for a heater. So some things you're going to see in wells in places where it doesn't freeze a whole lot, but it does during the winter, just maybe 1 or 2 days or a little bit, is you're going to have an extra electrical outlet in the back here like this. And then in our case, we have an electrical cord will plug in and it heats up. There's a little orange tape on here and it keeps the pipes warm, so that way the water doesn't freeze in the pipes and keeps them moving. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. Like I did say, we do have these extra tanks here, this green one and the small one behind. That is mainly for extra water storage. We're going to be talking about why we did it a little bit later, but it's basically so we could have extra water reserves so we can water crops and plants and stuff that we put in. So if you guys have any questions, comments, anything about wells, storage tanks, whatnot, I can try and help you. I'm by no means an expert, but I have learned a little bit in this process and can hopefully help you guys out with that. So thanks a lot, y'all. Have a good one. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. If you haven't already, please consider clicking on the subscribe link below. Also, we have the video that YouTube recommends for you down here to your left, as well as our most recent video to your right.